What are we dealing with all those penalties? Well, these are statistical secrets that you need to know heading into the Italian Grand Prix. Welcome to the Pitwall. I'm Jay, and let's go. We're going to just show you, if you haven't already, follow on Twitter, FIF1 Documents Bot. You can also go to the website for the FIA to pull up these documents, but you can just see here all these documents that show all the grid penalties people are receiving. And to better understand what is going on, let me just kick it over to my spreadsheet. Link is in the description below. Now, here we're going to notice that in free practice session 1, you had Mick Schumacher, who was being subbed in for Giovinazzi, then De Vries in for Vettel, and so those two, you can take those out. But Mick Schumacher did not perform good when he got back in the car. You can see that he was back of the pack, and then we saw Vettel get a little bit better. Now, the only person that is different from everyone else was Tsunoda, who set times on mediums. That's crazy that he was faster than these other cars, which were all running softs down here. But this is where now things are getting tricky, because I have shown here on the right hand side drivers and how they're being impacted by grid penalties, and if they're eligible for a quality race streak. I know I normally put those as separate categories, but we're just putting it all together because it's so impactful. Now, if you look at the free practice session 1 through 2 for Belgium, which was a high-speed circuit, you could see that Leclerc was looking really fast, followed by Verstappen, Sainz, Stroll, and then you had your two Mercedes, and then you had your two McLaren, and you had Albon. I haven't been running Albon recently, but he is probably the one to go with if you look at how he's performing here. He is a little bit slower. He's averaging 11th instead of 9th, and Norris is averaging 10th instead of what he was before. But notice, though, that while Norris wasn't doing really good in free practice session 1, free practice session 2 gives us the best idea of qualifying pace, and Norris was 4th fastest during free practice session 2. Just to put that in perspective, he's faster than two Mercedes and a Red Bull, and clearly faster than the Alpines. Albon still, if he can be in the top 10 and hold on to his position. The Williams has the ability of creating DRS trains, and people aren't able to pass him. That's why Albon's strong, because he's pretty cheap and he can stay ahead. So then we start looking at how these drivers are being affected. Bottas, who's DNF 3 races in a row, here he is getting a huge 26 grid penalty because of his 15 plus his averaging being 11. Now, this isn't an exact science, but the point is he's pretty much back of the grid. Tsunoda, 10 place penalty because of all of his reprimands. He's gotten 5 over the course of the season. Another 3 grid drop for failing to adhere to yellow flags in free practice session 2, and a back of the grid because of his engine part. So he is 45 penalty points. But here's the thing, just because you go to the back doesn't mean that you're going to automatically be 20th. And so Tsunoda probably will be because of his penalties, but since he has something called back of the grid, it's really tricky how the penalties are, and we're not going to get into that now. The point is, Tsunoda is probably not an option that you want to consider because he started at the back of the grid. He probably doesn't have the speed to be able to be gaining positions. And then you have Bottas, who is also in the same boat. Now, in seasons past, your points for passing or being passed were based off of your starting grid. This season, though, it's based off of the previous session's results. So Bottas, Tsunoda, Perez, Norris, Hamilton, Verstappen, or Sainz, they can all qualify really high, then take their penalty, which means that the previous session, let's say Sainz, for example, who's starting pretty much at the back of the grid. If Sainz qualifies P2 and gets 9 points in qualifying, then he drops to the back of the grid. He has to get all the way back up to P2 in order to not get any negative points. And that's the problem about like Bottas and Tsunoda. You probably don't want to be having guys who are going to stay at the back of the grid, get negative 10 points, and then can't get it back. Perez can get 10 points for his race streak as well as Sainz. And this is why it's good to keep potentially both of these drivers, because this race streak will nullify any positions that they might lose during the race. And so that means that they could potentially still be getting some decent points if they're able to claw back into the top 10. And that's why I'm probably going to not sub out Perez or Sainz. Also, because my two teams, a little foreshadowing, have already done 2 of the 3 substitutions. You get Norris, who looks like he's really good. Not only could he get plus 5 points for his quality streak, he's also really high up there in his pace. Hamilton, back of the grid, and it all depends on if he gets stuck in DRS trains if he can make it back, but he has nothing that can help overcome or soften the blow of taking that grid. Verstappen's taking a 5 grid position because of an engine. I would expect Verstappen to get those positions back. Now, you lose 2 points per each position lost, so he would start the race with negative 10 points, but probably can easily overcome that. And let's say he does start in P9, or let's say he even gets pole position. If Verstappen gets pole position, then there's really no way for him to get points for gaining positions. But let's say the 2 Ferraris qualify ahead of him and he starts here in P3. 3 plus 5 is 8, so he could get back to P3, and if either of the Ferraris have a problem, then he could then jump ahead of him. Now, you have to remember that Sainz is starting at the back of the pack, so if Verstappen qualifies P3 and then Sainz goes to the back, Verstappen's already got a position back, and so that would be fascinating that he gets that little cushion. Problem is Verstappen's often too expensive for most teams. So let's now look at our constructors. We've got Red Bull, who can get 5 points for a quali streak, and Alpine 10 points. Is Alpine the play, though? That would be crazy. I don't have enough substitutions to do this big brain, but if I hadn't pulled the trigger so early in the week and had left 2 substitutions on the table, I could have gone from Ferrari to Alpine, get the plus 10, and then put like Verstappen on my team. The problem is Red Bull still has a strong case for getting a lot of points. If Verstappen is going to be on the podium, and Perez, who could be starting the back of the pack, if he can get back into the top 10, right, then they can still get a decent amount of points. And the Alpine, then the question is, are these 2 guys able to qualify high and stay high, or are they losing positions, which would ultimately hurt their team? Now looking at F1FantasyTools.com, I've been using this recently. If you haven't, you can always go to this website, put in the price of your team, and it'll show you your best team options. As you can see here, they're recommending Red Bull, and then as it pertains to the lineups, they're recommending to Turbo Perez. Now, Perez does have a race streak, but like I told you, that could be dealing with his grid drops that he has. So that would be fascinating, because if the 10 is there to offset the penalties of starting at the back of the grid and he has to overcome all those positions just to get back to 0, but if he ever gains any positions, then it's now doubling it. That would be fascinating. I'm leaning towards a Leclerc because Sainz is also starting from the back of the grid. So I'm leaning towards a Leclerc who's able to stay at the front. I think gutsy people might even turbo Norris, but don't know about that. And Magnussen, I wouldn't put Mick Schumacher because of the penalty he just got. Albon's looking pretty good, so I would have to see with my last substitution what I'll do with. And before we get to my lineup, I want to promo for you our 1 race challenge, 1 team, 1 entrance, 1 opportunity to be able to get on our ORC leaderboard. And so the top 3 will be able to get special shout outs. I put them on YouTube and Twitter and Discord. And yes, I know I haven't done the internet's best lineups recently because of the busyness, but we do get a break between this race and the next one, so I'll be able to overview the last 3 races and give those proper shout outs. You'll find the code in the description below and on the screen. If we get at least 50 people to join, we can be submitted into the large leagues, and you guys do great, so why not join in and have fun with this alternative way of keeping track of a leaderboard, a championship throughout the season. Now to my teams. They look identical. I used 2 substitutions on both teams. As you can see here, budget of 108.7, 107.8. Team 2, almost 150 points more, mainly to how I use Mega Drivers, but I've used 2 substitutions already. I am going to be okay, hopefully, with Red Bull getting a quali streak plus 5 points and Verstappen surging. Hopefully, Red Bull will be okay with Perez unless he gets stuck on a DRS train. So you can see here, I'm turboing Leclerc because I think that if he can lead from the front, the most positions he will lose in a race is 1 if Verstappen's able to beat him in the race. And so that would be giving him a lot of points. But I could see the allure for having someone with a race streak, but they're getting those penalties. That's the big problem. So then I have to decide Alonso, Magnussen. I only have 1 substitution left. That's the tricky thing because Perez used to have Russell. I picked up Russell because of his power streak. I've gone back to Perez because I still think that the Red Bulls are going to have better pace than the Mercedes on this type of track. So if we come here, the one guy is either Magnussen or Alonso. Now Alonso's 12.7. If I picked up Lando Norris, who could give me a quali streak, he's 15.9. I could have 0.2 remaining and Norris could be stonks. So that's what I'm thinking, but I'm going to wait for free practice session 3. I only have 1 substitution left, so I don't want to quite pull that trigger. Now let's undo it all. Now, as you can see though, I can't do the same thing on team 2 because I have $1 million less in the budget. So if I can't switch Alonso to Norris, can I switch Magnussen to Albon? Yes, and I'd have 0.9. So that might be what I have to do with these two strategies. I'd put Albon on team 2 and Norris on team 1. So let me know in the comments below what your lineups are. Recognize I don't have a lot of variability because I already had used 2 subs because of the jump off from Russell's power streak and Ferrari as a constructor into the Red Bull Perez camp. But let me know what you think of this Norris, Albon, who you're going to turbo on your team. And until next time, I'll see you on the pit wall.